I once overheard an American tourist in Rome say, "It's crazy how close everything is in Europe. You can drive from Italy to Paris in like 2 hours, right?" The guide smiled. "That would be a miracle." The tourist frowned. "Wait, aren't they neighbors?" The guide said softly in a very poetic sense. That's when I realized Americans don't just misunderstand geography, they reinterpret it. For them, the world isn't measured in kilometers. It's measured in confidence. A couple from Texas rented a car in Milan and told the rental agent they'd swing by the Eiffel Tower for dinner before heading to Venice. The agent froze. "That's across the country." The woman laughed. "We're from Texas. Everything's across something." 8 hours later, they were still in northern Italy eating gas station sandwiches, arguing about whether Switzerland was a detour. When they returned the car 2 days later, the man said, "We didn't make it to Paris, but we saw a lot of Irish stuff." He smiled proudly, as if geography were a suggestion, not a system. In Berlin, a student from Ohio asked a Belgian classmate, "So, what's it like living in Europe?" The Belgian smiled politely. "You're in Europe right now." The American blinked. "No, I mean real Europe, like Paris, London, Italy." He paused. "This part feels more Eastern." The Belgian said, "We're west of you." He stared at the map, then at the Belgian, as if being geographically corrected were a personal attack. Later, he tweeted, "Berlin is cool, but you can totally tell it's near Russia." A man in Madrid proudly told his waiter, "It's great that you guys speak Spanish, too." The waiter blinked, too. "Yeah," the man said, "just like in Mexico. Small world, right?" The waiter replied, "Very small, apparently." Then the man asked where the border was between Spain and Mexico. When told they were separated by an ocean, he shook his head. "That's bad planning," he said. "You'd think Spanish countries would want to stay together." He looked genuinely disappointed in geography, like someone who'd found a typo in reality. For Americans, geography isn't just misunderstood, it's domesticated. They come from a land so vast that driving for 10 hours still keeps them in the same culture, the same language, the same food chain. Distance means nothing when everything looks familiar. Europe, on the other hand, changes every few hours. New language, new currency, new rhythm. So when Americans try to explain geography to Europeans, they're really explaining America, a place so large it flattened perspective. It's not arrogance, it's calibration. When your world is measured in interstates, borders start to feel like bad customer service. A tourist in Dublin once asked a guide if he could take a ferry to New York just for the photo. The guide stared at him for a full 5 seconds, then said, "Only if you start rowing now." The man laughed. "I'm serious. I saw it on the map. It's right across." He later bought a souvenir globe and spun it, frowning. "It doesn't look that far." He posted on Facebook. "Tried to book a quick ferry from Ireland to New York. Turns out the ocean's bigger in real life." That comment section became an anthropology exhibit. A couple in Prague asked their concierge if they could visit Greece after lunch. When he told them it was a 2-hour flight, they looked offended. The husband said, "We've got a rental. We'll just drive." He opened Google Maps, zoomed out until Europe fit on one screen, and said, "See, it's right there." The concierge muttered something in Czech that probably meant Godspeed. They set off anyway. 4 countries later, they stopped in Hungary, took a selfie, and captioned it, "Almost Greece." They never made it, but they did prove one thing. Optimism has better mileage than logic. An American in Paris once asked a shopkeeper, "Do you guys visit Germany often?" The shopkeeper said, "Sometimes. It's 5 hours by train." The American gasped, 5 hours. But that's a different country. The shopkeeper smiled. "Yes, that's how it works," he whispered, amazed. That's like driving from California to Nevada, but with an accent. Later, he told his friend, "I didn't know countries could be so close together. It feels unnatural." Europe to him wasn't a continent. It was a hide-and-sighty neighborhood with too many flags. When Americans try to process Europe, they don't see borders. They see bugs in the map. The distances feel wrong. The variety feels excessive. And the coexistence seems statistically impossible. How can 20 countries fit where one state used to be? But that's the difference. Americans were raised on expansion. Europeans were raised on proximity. One was taught to conquer space, the other to share it. So when the two meet, the misunderstanding isn't geographical, it's philosophical. Americans measure the world in size. Europeans measure it in stories. An American tourist in Copenhagen asked a bartender, "So is Norway like your southern cousin?" The bartender laughed. "It's north of here." The tourist frowned. "That can't be right. Sweden's up there." He pulled out his phone, turned the map upside down, and said, "See, now it makes sense." To him, geography wasn't fixed. It was user-friendly. He toasted with his beer and said, "Man, Europe should really standardize this stuff." The bartender just said, "We tried once." It was called the Empire. A man from Florida visiting London kept checking his weather app. He said, "It says it's 70°F, but it feels like 50." His friend corrected him. "That's because it's Celsius." The man looked confused. So Celsius is just the British way of exaggerating. When told that most of the world uses it, he replied, "You'd think someone would fix that by now." He left a 1-star review for global weather inconsistency. Every culture has blind spots. America's isn't ignorance, it's insulation. When you grow up in a country so big, so self-contained, you start thinking the world adapts to you. And in many ways, it does. That's why Americans abroad often sound like they're giving tech support to geography. Have you tried restarting your borders? But underneath the jokes lies something sadder. The world was never small. It just became optional. And when everything outside feels optional, understanding stops being necessary. So when Americans try to explain geography to Europeans, it's not just comedy. It's a mirror. It shows what happens when a country grows so large it mistakes perspective for truth. And somewhere between Paris and Texas, a tourist is still zooming out on Google Maps, trying to make the world fit his screen. And in that tiny digital motion lies the entire misunderstanding of a generation. The belief that if something looks close, it must be simple. A woman from California visited Rome and asked a priest near St. Peter's Square, "So how often do you have to go through customs to get into the Vatican?" He smiled. "Never. I live here." She blinked. "No, I mean when you go to Italy," he said. "This is Italy." She frowned, frustrated. "Then why does it have its own flag?" The priest chuckled softly. "Because faith is sometimes stronger than geography." She stared for a moment, then whispered, "That's actually beautiful." Later, she wrote in her travel journal, "The Vatican, a small country trapped inside another one. America should try that with Texas." In a hotel lobby in Athens, an American tourist asked the receptionist, "So, from here, can you see Africa on a clear day?" The receptionist blinked. "Africa, it's across the sea." He pointed at the horizon. "Yeah, but, like, not far, right?" "Maybe a few miles." She smiled politely. "More than a few." He nodded. "Seriously, I knew it." Climate change. He later posted on social media, "Africa used to be visible from Greece. Locals say it's drifting away." The comments were full of support and not one correction. A man from Chicago once asked a Croatian taxi driver, "So, which country are you in now? Serbia or Bosnia?" The driver turned around slowly and said, "Croatia." The tourist laughed nervously. "Yeah, but who owns it?" The driver said, "We do." The man looked out the window and said, "That's confusing. Back home, everything belongs to someone." The driver smiled. "That's why you get lost here. Not because you don't know where you are, but because you can't imagine a place that doesn't need to belong." American geography runs on possession, land, property, ownership. European geography runs on presence, history, identity, memory. One builds walls, the other builds museums. So when Americans travel, they don't just cross borders, they cross philosophies. They expect logic, they find legacy. And that's why conversations about distance or borders sound absurd, because Americans inherited a map of control, while Europeans inherited a map of consequence. The first asks, "Who owns this?" The second asks, "Who remembers?"